Some people love desert, ocean, or high mountains. My favorite is the forest inside the Olympic National Park in Washington state. In this past year, I traveled from California to Olympic Peninsula 4 times. In this video, I will tell you about our most recent 3-day backpacking trip through Enchanted Valley to what's left of Anderson Glacier. Hello and welcome to Telvia. We left our home in California before sunrise on Monday morning, heading north along Highway 5. Raging fires in Northern California filled sky with dense smoke. A faint red disk of sun was barely visible in mid-morning sky when we passed the Lake Shasta area. The air started to clear as we traveled into Oregon. By late afternoon, we arrived at our campground near Astoria, Oregon, and were greeted by a fresh ocean breeze. We had a restful night after a long drive. In mid-afternoon next day, we arrived at Graves Creek Campground east of Quinault, Washington. The head trail of Enchanted Valley is just quarter of a mile from this campground, so it served as a perfect stop for starting our hike early next morning. After a hearty breakfast next morning, we backpacked 14 miles to Enchanted Valley Campground on the trail following the East Fork of the Quinault River. The moment I stepped on the trail, I felt the welcoming energy of the place, which muted all other preoccupations of my mind and filled my heart with excitement and anticipation. The scenery was changing with every turn of the trail as we ascended the hills from valley to valley and crossed creeks feeding into the river. After a couple of miles, the trail follows the river very closely, opening up to magnificent views of the river and forest along it. The sound of quickly moving water was invigorating and inviting to have a closer look, to touch the water, and to be in the moment. This trail is long enough and our backpacks were heavy enough to make our bodies work hard, while our mind's chatter has quieted down. It felt good to surrender to what is here and now and absorb a powerful vibration of this place. We arrived to the remote campground in mid-afternoon and set up our tent next to the river. We brought with us homemade freeze-dried food and enjoyed it after a strenuous day of hiking. Our recently acquired updated backpacking gear made our camping enjoyable, comfortable, and frustration-free. If you're interested to see what gear we found most valuable on this hike, watch our recently published video following the link on the screen or in the description. Next morning, after nourishing our bodies with freeze-dried oatmeal-fortified pluots and walnuts, we continued the trail towards Anderson Pass and the glacier. The new views of river, forest, groves, meadows, and to Mount Anderson inspired us to push forward. It felt good to stretch our stiff muscles after yesterday's backpacking hike. After about 3.5 miles, my wife decided to head back to our tent site in order to conserve her strength for our return backpack hike planned for the next day. I was determined to press onward since I had attempted this hike to Anderson Glacier in October last year, but was stopped by a major rainstorm approaching the area that day. The weather was perfect for this attempt, so I pushed forward to fulfill my dream of hiking this section of the trail. The sad fact is that Anderson Glacier has lost more than 90% of its surface area in 20th century, and by 2011 it was gone. The lake at foothill of Mount Anderson, formed by annual snowmelt, is still there though, and I wanted to see it. As I was powering up the trail, I saw a long waterfall on my left and wondered if this was an outflow from the slopes of Mount Anderson. My progress up the trail was slowed down by enormous fields of wild berries growing on the slopes along the trail. It was impossible to resist stopping again and again to collect a handful of both blueberries and elderberries and enjoy their mouth-watering taste and aroma. I reached the top of Anderson Pass where the trail crosses to the Dassevalitz Valley. A sign pointing to the less traveled trail to the left indicated that the Anderson Glacier was only 0.9 miles away. This section of the trail was steeper as it climbed up along the slopes covered by an even greater plethora of ripe blueberries and elderberries bushes. Soon I got to a small ledge on the slope with a small shallow pond that was almost dry and didn't look like a blue lake I'd heard other hikers talk about. I could see the top of Mount Anderson from that spot, and I knew that I needed to continue forward on the barely visible now trail up. At almost 5,000 feet of elevation, spring comes late to this part of the wilderness, and fresh wildflowers greeted me with spring vigor along this section of the trail. Finally, an awe-inspiring 360-degree view opened up to me as I climbed to the top of the moraine formed by the glacier on Mount Anderson. Snow from the last winter was still melting into the blue lake in front of me. The color of the lake changes depending on the lighting conditions during the day. I was fortunate enough to have a partially cloudy sky with the fast-moving light clouds. I would describe the color of the lake below me as heavenly blue that day. I stood in this spot for a while, absorbing the energy of this place. Behind me, tall, rugged mountain peaks on the other side of the trail drew my eye west to Enchanted Valley with its multitude of cascading small valleys and gulches nourishing creeks joining into East Fork Quinault River. Following the moraine to the left along the Blue Lake, I descended down on the steep slope a few hundred feet to see the outflow of the lake down a vertical drop off the mountainside. From this point, I was able to see the depths of Enchanted Valley and the Blue Lake dropping its waters into the valley. I felt that seeing this view was worth the 3-day and almost 40-mile hike to get here. I didn't want to leave the moraine and wished to spend more time there, but I knew that my wife would be worried, and I started to head back. As I took my last look of the lake, I promised myself that I would come here again and camp at the lake next time. On my return down the trail, I looked again at the waterfall on my right, knowing that this waterfall was flowing from the blue lake I just saw. When back at the campground, my first wish was to dip myself into the river to both cool down and to be one with the river for a moment. The water was cold, clean, and energizing. As we boiled water and rehydrated our freeze-dried food, people at the nearby camps noticed a black bear walking along the river on the other side. The bear ambled down into the water to take a long bath and, before it crossed and started to pick up berries about 50 feet from our campsite. A number of excited campers came to make noise, and the bear reluctantly retreated back into the woods. Next day was cool and mist hung low over us as we hiked back to our van. I wondered, what calls us coming to these remote places, hiking long miles with heavy backpacks and camping in the wild? I think the answer is different for everyone. For me, this is a moment of being one with the forest, river, and now the Blue Lake and Mount Anderson. I communed with the soul of this place on the trail and at the Blue Lake, and I know it will call me back again. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it inspired you to visit your favorite places in nature. Happy hiking. Cheers.